Are we good? We'll call the meeting to order. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Council and Committee meeting. As you can see, we've moved into the main council chambers. So Mayor Stewart is to my left. My name is Councillor Dennis Mars, and I'm the acting mayor for the remainder of this year and have the privilege of chairing today's meeting. With that, I would turn it over to Madam Clerk, our first item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have not received any other business items in advance of the meeting.
Excellent.
So item 1 is the minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held on Monday, November 7th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Towner. In favor? Opposed? Carried? Oh, we've got a... Favor? Opposed? Carried? You can go on. Okay.
Sorry, this is adoption of, where are we at?
First item, minutes.
So I have a question on page 4, the minutes. The paragraph after the billets, there is a comment here that via a show of hands, the chair summarized the feedback. That's in the minutes, correct?
Correct.
And it says that there was a show of hands and there is no record that I specifically refrained from taking a position at that point in time, and I'd like it recorded in the minutes if you wouldn't mind that I didn't raise my hand in one way or the other at the meeting that day.
It's not a formal vote. It was a straw poll. Is our precedent to typically record opposing positions on straw votes?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we ask the minutes be reflected.
I would put that to the committee if there is no opposition in terms of that. We can take it back, and as revised, we can approve the minutes.
Mayor Stewart?
Thank you. It wouldn't normally be protocol that the minutes would reflect that, but our minutes could reflect that Councillor Zerillo raised it. The minutes typically don't reflect in straw polls those that don't participate. But it would be appropriate that Councillor Zerillo's comment today be reflected in the minutes today.
Is that consistent with protocol, Madam Clerk?
Yes, that is. So I would put that to the committee if they're accepting of those changes to reflect in these minutes. We can do that definitely.
Okay.
And I had one more item,
Quick, before we move on to the next item, a quick show of hands, then we're fine with that? Okay. Fine, thank you.
I'm excluding myself from the show.
was movement towards a program through our Grain City partner here in Coquitlam about the supervised injection site. So the minutes are not clear on that. It was my understanding that the deputy city manager said that there was no conversations at this point in time about supervised injection sites coming to Coquitlam through Grain City. And I don't really, it seems a little ambiguous in the minutes.
Mr. Dumont.
Thank you through the chair. I believe the comments I made, Fraser Health is going to be meeting with Rain City in order to come up with a program, an education program about needles, and also to get former addicts to help with the cleanup of needles that may be around the site. But to my knowledge, there hasn't been any discussion around safe injection sites.
Okay.
So that was my understanding to date, but those programs haven't been developed yet.
Councilor Zerillo?
Yep, that's good. I just want, it's not clear in the minutes that that's what was spoken about.
Excellent. So would I now entertain a motion to accept minutes? It's already been moved and seconded, correct? In favor? Opposed? Carried? Item 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 2 is our first delegation from the Grandmother Advocacy Network. I'd like to invite Ms. Bev Harris and Ms. Gail Mullen to please come forward. They will be speaking to the End Violence Against Women campaign.
Hi. I wonder if I could pass this handout to Council. Gail Mullen, unfortunately, was not able to be here. She had to have surgery. Us grandmothers seem to be doing that quite a bit. Kathleen Wallace-Deering has graciously stepped in. It's one thing we find about our grandmothers, they look after each other. I'd like to thank Council for hearing us, and a special thank you for Kathleen Reinheimer for arranging to have the fountain at Lafarge Lake turned orange on November 25th. And this is to mark the Orange the World campaign and to hopefully have the new lights, if they're installed in time, on Pine Way orange as well. I have passed out a handout if any of you have not heard about the Orange campaign. And our idea is to draw attention to the issue of violence against women around the world by painting everything orange. And we'd like to thank everybody who has already done that in dress and even in hair. The background is that the United Nations has declared the campaign to orange the world from November 24th to October, or to December, pardon me. On the 25th, it's the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And we're a part of the GRAN group, the Grandmother group. In Vancouver, we've got City Hall, BC Place, Science World, and Canada Place, and the Sales of Lights, all turned orange. And so the United Nations is behind this, as well as cities all across Canada and the rest of the world. We have the Eiffel Tower, the United Nations building, and we've even got Niagara Falls painted orange. The idea behind it is just to draw attention to the issue. Violence against women in the world is one of our major concerns, and the GRAN group, along with all these other groups, is drawing attention to the issue. I saw a little story that kind of caught my eye. It was a little country called Oman, and their camels are super valuable to them, and they pay up to $40,000 for a camel. And the camel is used as a beast of burden and also is valuable in camel races. In that country, it's a highly punishable crime to beat a camel, but it's not a crime to beat a woman. So we want to change that, not only here, but around the world.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Questions from Council?
Any questions?
I'd like to thank you for coming out today and sharing this with us. And I believe Ms. Reinheimer has taken the steps necessary, I believe, to ensure the fountain is lit up. And we'll certainly do that to support your campaign. I know there's a lot of great groups in our municipality that work to support women escaping aggressive and violent situations. And so I thank you for the efforts and the work that you and your group are doing.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 3 is a delegation from Mr. Brian Bastien. Mr. Bastien will be speaking to curling in the city of Coquitlam.
Mr. Bastien. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. I just want to
where we do have a 5-minute time limit, we'd ask you try to stay as tight as you can. I appreciate that.
Does it start even when I just want to talk about the difficulty hearing? Is the clock running?
I haven't started it yet, sir.
I better just short circuit everything. I'll start when you tell me to.
Please proceed. Please proceed.
I want to thank staff for finally indicating, without specific acknowledgement, that the revenue that was missing from the curling rink was $142,000, although I had conservatively estimated and used in my earlier analysis $100,000. According to the new report, staff has calculated the 12-month curling plus skating ice cost recovery rate to be a favorable 51%. See the chart on page 11. This table, however, continues to show costs and expenditures of $460,000 based on 29,000 square feet. We did prove in my submission of October 17th that the square footage is actually closer to 22,000 square feet. If the proper lower square footage is taken into consideration, this brings the cost recovery to 65%. This only goes to prove that the current combination of 7 months of curling with 5 months of skating is an excellent combination. Financially, the cost recovery ratio is excellent, and from the participation usage standpoint, it is also good because curlers have the greatest amount of participants on the ice, while skaters have the fewest. On Friday at 5 p.m., staff provided a new and very different report to Council, once again ambushing the association by giving no notice of it prior to that date. The new report suddenly claims that the methodology used by the consultant to distribute costs was wrong. The consultant does not claim that he was wrong. It is simply a claim by staff. It is my submission that this claim is not credible and should be rejected. For more than 6 months, the financial after that release of that report, staff took no issue with the consultant's prorated, based on square footage, methodology. In fact, staff endorsed and championed that method as a reason for our eviction. If staff truly believed that the methodology was wrong, it should have immediately advised Council. That is its obligation. I contend that staff did not advise Council of any problem with regard to this methodology because it was of the view that nothing was wrong with it. I say that the staff's attempt at an implicit admission that it engaged in professional negligence in this regard should be rejected.
Sir, I would urge you, the staff can't defend themselves, and to call a staff person negligent or to suggest some kind of misrepresentation on staff's behalf, no one has suggested that you've misrepresented, even though some of the numbers haven't borne out, but you can't refer to staff as negligent or a staff as misrepresentative or a staff. Please don't do that.
Am I able to respond or no? Is this on the time?
Acknowledge the mayor to
I want to clarify, I said that I do not accept any implicit admission by staff of their negligence.
Okay. Thank you.
Because they would have been negligent if they knew it was wrong and did nothing by advising Council of something they knew was wrong. They have a responsibility to do so but did not.
Okay.
And I say that's not really what happened.
I appreciate your clarification, and thank you very much. Proceed.
A far more credible explanation is that the reason for the last-minute change in staff position is because I had exposed the unfair downloading of costs from the main arena onto curlers and the measurement error of the curling rink. These were a problem for staff. As a result, it is my submission that staff contrived a new methodology to cover up the indefensible methodology weakness in the original consultant report, despite the fact that staff had supported and endorsed it for many months. Staff now suddenly claim that the prorating methodology is, quote, actually not truly representative of the proper absolute distribution of costs. Which of the different staff positions and consultant positions should we believe? Staff suddenly claims that the costs should now simply be divided equally amongst 3 revenues. It is irrelevant to staff that the main arena is 220% larger than the curling rink. Instead, staff relies on only a cherry-picking reference to different labor costs, which I say is wholly inefficient from a professional perspective. Moreover, staff provides no basis for using this new methodology that ignores and acts contrary to the consultant's determination that the main had costs greater than the other revenues by $229,000. That change in position of staff is harmful to curlers and should be rejected by council, in my opinion, as not being credible. I say that on matters of important public policy, the public should not be expected to accept that is the way just because staff says that is the way it is, especially given the current circumstances where self-interest is at play. I would now like to address the new report and its reference to the alleged potential extra revenue generated by converting the curling rink. This new report identifies for the first time these potential cost savings, and I've quoted it there. I'll let you read that later because I've got to move on due to the time restrictions. But I admit that after having read and reread the above many times, and after having reviewed Attachment A, I am unable to specifically understand in any meaningful way what will happen to the curling rink in terms of users, usage, and finances after curlers are evicted. I sought out 10 members of the public with master's degree. They agreed with me. I asked council members to do their own assessment as to whether you can understand what's really happening when you read those words. I also note the use imprecise words like could, would, if. In my opinion, staff should stand up and be accountable. If it will happen, plus or minus something, then staff should say so. But it does not. To me, these are escape words.
You're at the 6-minute mark now, sir. If I could ask you, perhaps I'll extend it a further 2 minutes. You've got a lot of notes here, and I don't want to cut you short with it, but I would ask.
I'm going to move right to the end.
2 more, I would appreciate it.
I can't do it. Okay, I'm moving last page. My first concluding comment is that this submission repeatedly demonstrates there has been insufficient information provided to the public. In addition, there has been a lack of reasonable time for the public to assess the report in order to give meaningful input to council about the proposed eviction of 2,700 plus curlers. This is because staff for the second time ambushed the curlers with inadequate notice. It is my request, therefore, that council defer the vote tonight and instruct staff to meet within 3 weeks with me and up to 2 members of the association to go over the current report, and that staff provide sufficient understanding with needed information so council can then receive meaningful input from us about the new and at the last minute information being used to evict us. If this happens, it would avoid the risk of a public dispute over curlers and the public being denied a sufficient understanding of the report and thereby being denied meaningful public input. If meaningful public is facilitated, council gains by being able to listen to what the views of the public are. My second concluding comment is that if council is determined to evict curlers tonight, that it pass another motion. I propose that the motion direct staff to provide council with a report every November for 3 years starting in 2018 that compares the prior year's costs and revenues to each of the 3 arenas with the projected costs and revenues for the applicable current year. In addition, that the curling rink numbers be compared with the numbers in Attachment A. Let me tell you what Attachment A really is in terms of an analogy. Imagine BC Lions. They close the top tier and they can't even sell the bottom one. So Attachment A is really this. The CEO says, you know, I got this formula, and it says that I can sell out 90% of the upper bowl at a lot greater cost. And so that CEO goes to the owner and says, look, I'm going to get $494,000 more every game. That CEO would not be working the next day. But that's the closest analogy to that Attachment A, which is quite frankly, in my view, spuriously misleading. Lastly, please note that the current configuration of 7 months of curling combined with 5 months of skating yields a cost recovery of 65%. I believe that this combination is very acceptable and beyond the 60% industry threshold identified by the consultant and should not be tampered with. Thank you.
Mr. Bastien, I want to thank you very much. I appreciate the passion you've brought to this and the research you've done. You have certainly shared a significant amount of information with us. And I know on behalf of my colleagues, we've had a great deal of reading, and I thank you for that. I think it is important that when we get these reports, we have the opportunity to hear and see other views with regards to contrary opinions and shed a light on information if there is believed to be some inaccuracies. So I want to thank you for bringing your passion towards this and for that of the Curling Association.
Thank you, and I would hope that you'll read what I gave you. There is some very disturbing information there you need to know.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Council? There being no comment from question from council, Madam Clerk, next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 4 is another delegation. I'd request Ms. Marilyn Black to please come forward. Ms. Black will be speaking to Sub-Area D preliminary land use and public consultation concerns.
Welcome, Ms. Black.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I've reminded our other speakers, we do have request a 5-minute time limit, and I will turn it over to yourself to share your thoughts. Thank you.
Mayor and council, it will be probably like a 3-minute because I tend to keep things short and concise. Regarding the sub-area D Coquitlam, I want to address the lack of consultation and the resident concerns. In May 2016, the preliminary Low-Keep Coquitlam land use directions were issued. The Low-Keep Coquitlam land use directions noted that along with Oakdale, sub-area D Coquitlam, an area with extensive proposed rezoning changes required further review. The report stated that staff would consult further with Oakdale and Coquitlam stakeholders and use this feedback to refine the land use directions. They would undertake consultation on land use changes and the appropriate transition with single-family homes, and would continue to work with the public in refining these land use directions over the coming months. Both in the report and in person, residents of Coquitlam were promised there would be additional public consultation and community input prior to the Low-Keep Coquitlam neighbourhood plan being drafted and presented to council. This did not happen. On October 24, 2016, the preliminary land use directions were presented to council and committee. Within the 16-page recommendation presented to council, Oakdale public consultation was addressed on 2.5 of the 3 pages in the body of this report. Additional and exclusive to Oakdale was Attachment 1, BLNP Oakdale Public Consultation Feedback, a 5-page document, and Attachment 4, Oakdale Park Planning Key Points, a 2-page document. Attachment 2 and 3 were general land use development plans. Everything in this report was exclusive Oakdale, and this is an area of concern to us. There was no additional public consultation for Coquitlam. In the 160 days since it promised the additional consultation, the city attended only a single regular meeting of the Coquitlam Community Association that we were not informed about and whose members reside outside of this area. In comparison, numerous residents and key stakeholders of this area, who on their own initiative provided the City of Coquitlam almost 2 months earlier with letters voicing their concerns to aspects of the preliminary plan, were dismissed. Contrary to the recommendations and promises, the October 24th report chose not to address resident concerns, ignoring their concerns and in direct contrast to its own criteria to ensure that the transition between land uses are more gradual, has proposed a half-block extension of the medium-density zoning to include the east side of Dogwood that will allow for construction of 8-story concrete high-rises immediately backing onto single-family homes, and townhouses and townhouse rezoning that will allow for massive 3-story townhouse developments well outside the core area and amidst the single-family dwellings. The May 2016 preliminary land use plan appears to be a done deal, and developers appear confident that it will be implemented unchanged. Almost immediately after the report was issued, developers commenced property purchase acquisition. Mosaic has contracted to purchase all but one of the properties on both sides of Seaton, with early 2017 closing dates, surveyed the properties, and we have heard the intent is to request the closure of Seton Avenue to further increase the size of this townhouse development. My direct involvement in this is I reside 1/2 block from where 8-story buildings will be, and I am directly the property adjoining where Mosaic has purchased. I have no laneway. My property abuts to where they will put these. There is a very large slope, and these 3-story townhouses will be much higher than 3-story. So I feel that, for one, my community and the people that I'm representing, we all have an input, but I feel I'm very impacted by what's going to happen if this goes through this way.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, could you perhaps respond to the comments with regards to the process that we've undertaken and where we are in it, or perhaps one of your team?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon. I'll turn over to Carl Johansson, our community planning manager, to speak more around the specifics, but we are still at a working stage in the Coquitlam draft Coquitlam neighborhood plan process. There has been consultation with the areas that was noted. There's some follow-up that will be done with those areas in particular as the plan goes forward. But if I could ask Carl around the specifics of the consultation in those two areas.
Yes, thank you, Jim, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and hi, Marilyn. Thank you for bringing those concerns to our attention, and I would say that the plan is not a done deal. We're going to be heading into phase 3, where we're going to be bringing forward a proposed draft plan and land use concept, and definitely going out for a public consultation on that for further review by residents, and the opportunity for feedback to staff, and staff would be bringing recommendations forward to council in the spring on which way to go. And in your area there, we are definitely aware of the medium density town housing. The existing land use in your area is the housing choices or neighborhood attached residential, which allows duplexes, fiveplexes, fourplexes, that sort of thing. So we were looking at town housing as something that's similar in built form. But again, we're aware of that potential for an abrupt transition, and we're going to look at that further. And in the report that we brought forward on October 24th, we did address the comments at a high level. There are some residents that have expressed support for change, and some have expressed the other way, no support for change. So we are going to be looking at that further as part of phase 3. And we can definitely discuss this further if you like after the meeting.
I would like the opportunity, and the concern here is we were told this was going to happen in phase 2. We were told it would happen between May and the time that they issued the report in fall of this year. As it turned out, it was in October. And we believed it would happen. And so if you go, the longer you go without the consultation, without the input, the more of these properties are being purchased without the development plan in place. And the harder it makes to go back, because then the developers are defending their position that they felt it was how it was going to be, that they had some assurances of this, they've bought the property, so it does become an issue. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. Oh, Ms. Black?
Ms. Black?
Ms. Black?
I'm sorry. Councillor O'Neill has a question.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I think in terms of my recollection of the meeting, we were quite focused on Oakdale as well, but we know that the report also did deal with Coquitlam Area D. Now, staff summarized I'm trying to understand your points versus staff summary. Staff summarized their interaction with Coquitlam residents regarding the area you are talking about by saying that, as noted above, staff met with the Coquitlam Community Association, it's called it the BCA, in September 2016, and feedback from that meeting indicates general support for the proposed preliminary land use direction and land use transitions. Now, how would you characterize that feedback from the BCA at that meeting?
The characterization, having talked to the BCAA, is they were not told about the opposition, they were not told of the residents' concerns, and we were not told about them. The meeting had 28 people from the BCA attending that meeting, and it was not to sit there and say, what do you think of this medium-high density? Those are the land issues that are concerned. And when we put in letters and we submit them, and I bring them in person to City Hall, to arbitrarily, if I can use that word, which may not agree with, to say, well, this we're not considering to phase 3, and this one meeting in 160 days, we are considering. They don't live in the area. They support us when they can, when they know about it.
Okay,
But
let me clarify something. Are you a member of the BCA?
not at the present time.
You aren't. And were you at that meeting?
Did not even know about
Oh,
it.
I see. Okay. So, I was a little confused about that, getting your relationship with the BCA. So you are, the second part of the staff report says that, that the staff has received written feedback from residents in sub-area D indicating various levels of support and non-support for land use changes. So that's where you come in there. Their summary is, of the feedback they got would be summarized in that line of support and non-support varying degrees. That covers just about everything, I guess. So I was just trying to figure out how you fit into the staff report that we considered, and certainly when I voted to move this on, it was from a reflecting the understanding that this would just move things into the next phase of a draft report where there would be more consultation as well. So. But I understand where you're coming from, and thank you for coming forward. It's good to know, and it's good for us to keep in mind that even community associations don't speak for the non-members, of course, as well.
And if they don't know of the issues, then they can't speak to it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Don't step away just yet. Councillor Wilson. We thought this would be easy.
Question probably for Mr. Johansson. If the BCA was not in existence in this area, would a more general sort of community open house have been used to get feedback on phase 2?
Yes, through to Councillor Wilson. Yeah, that's correct. We use a lot of we use surveys, online surveys, and yes, open houses, public open houses are our main forum, and we definitely will be coming back to Burquitlam for open houses in phase 3, and we're hoping to get at Miller Park Elementary or Mountain View, perhaps even a Media Learning Academy.
Great.
So is it safe then to say in this particular case that the reliance on the community association maybe didn't provide a deep enough representation of this one neighborhood?
I would say that in the report, we acknowledge that we've heard, like I said before, levels of support and non-support, and we would have to look at that further. Feedback from the BCA is very valuable. From our community associations, it's always valuable. But we also have to go out with the open houses, and we also consult directly with residents that approach us. And we will be replying to the feedback as it comes in. We get a lot of feedback, so our apologies if we didn't acknowledge that. But we are analyzing it.
In the meantime, do developers get approval to go ahead with their plans?
Mr. Johansson.
I'm sorry, Marilyn, I missed your question.
In the meantime, between now and the time that the final report goes out and the additional consultation is done, do developers get the okay to proceed with their development, even when it is not finalized in the development plan?
Right now, the Burquitlam area has an existing land use plan that's in the OCP. And with the housing choices land use designation for your area, for example, we do have a transit-oriented development strategy that allows consideration of OCP amendments, but that's on a case-by-case basis. This area is identified as a shoulder area in the TDS. In terms of the plan itself, we are looking to bring forward a draft land use concept for further consultation in the coming weeks, and then going out and consulting on it. And we won't be bringing forward a recommendation on the land use plan until probably March of 2017.
So prior to that time, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the full answer.
So, in summary, I believe, Mr. Johansson, you could clarify that this would indicate that should somebody wish to move forward with the development prior to this work being completed in March, as you indicated, they would be required to put forth an OCP amendment in addition to it and extol the merits of council acting prior to the completion of your work. Is that correct?
That's correct. But the main thrust of doing this plan is to get those the land uses, whatever is recommended at the end of the day, into the OCP and bring it up to date. And I also wanted to mention that with our consultation program, we mailed out 12,000 letters for the last phase, and we will be doing that again in order to maximize awareness of the upcoming consultation.
Can I ask Ms. Black, or did you get one of those letters? Are you on that?
The only letter I had received was a letter recently regarding the park development, not regarding any rezoning changes. And we received a prior letter months earlier, and it was regarding artificial turf. So those are the two letters I have been in receipt in living in that area.
So is it possible that that 12,000 household area?
Or perhaps it was pertaining to the park, the 12,000. I don't know.
May not have included Ms. Black's residence?
Yes, when we do the mail outs, they're according to the Canada Post walking routes, mailing routes, but we included every residence and commercial business within the Coquitlam-Lougheed area and also a buffer around it. So there's additional residents outside of the plan area that would have received mail outs. And again, Canada Post changes their mail out walking routes occasionally. But we average between 11 to 12,000 mailouts. And
so was that the one we received on the park?
I'm just speaking specifically to the first rounds of consultation or open houses for phase 1 and phase 2. Now, for the next phase, we'll make sure that we are endeavoring to get the notices out in a better way. And in fact, we'll be engaging the BCA to help us with that.
So if I might interject, Councillor Wilson, you complete?
Oh, I guess my question is, there was phase 1 and phase 2 consultation for the whole plan, but I thought we were digging down a little deeper into this area and the Oakdale area, and so I'm just trying to understand, you know, if we actually did dig down deeper or deep enough in this particular area. Or because you're confusing me with talking about the advertisement that was done for phase 2. That was for the general part of the plan, but not the digging down deeper phase. Is that correct?
Yes, for the two main public consultation phases, we did the large mailouts, and then when we came back, in May. We mentioned we would consult further with Oakdale Neighbours Association and the Coquitlam Community Association. And that's what we moved forward with in that phase. And in the meantime, we also heard feedback from residents, which we acknowledged in the report, and we're also going to be looking at further in phase 3. And when we go out for public consultation again, we will be doing that mail out.
Sure, but I'm just, so this deeper consultation period for beyond phase 2, how were the residents notified of that consultation? Or was it just mainly through BCA?
It was mainly through BCA.
It's solely through BCAA.
For both of those items, for Oakdale and Coquitlam, we mentioned Oakdale Neighbourhood Association and Coquitlam Community Association. But we're always open to receiving feedback throughout the process. It's an open process. And
if they don't know about it, they won't be able to give any feedback.
Correct. And the report also stated you would do public consultation, of which you would include the BCAA. That was in the report that was put out in May, not exclusive. And holding one meeting in 160 days by attending one of their regular meetings does not provide us with the public consultation that we were led to believe would occur.
And I think from our standpoint, you know, if we're going to get information that, well, I assume there was probably a lot more consultation done. I think Councillor O'Neill in his question was getting to the same point. So I think it's important that if we're going to dig deeper, we do more than just rely on one source. Anyways, that's...
Mr. Johansson?
Absolutely. I hear what you're saying, Councillor Wilson, and I promise that we will be doing more consultation before we come back with a finalized land use concept for Council's consideration.
Thank you. Thank you for.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. And for Mr. Johansson, I think what we appear to be hearing is that, of course, while the overall consultation in sections 1 and 2 was good with that information, when we start to get these slivers down there, let's make sure we reach out very clearly into this section D and ensure that we reach all of them, because clearly the community associations don't represent everybody, and thus their messages don't get out to every resident. So let's make sure that we take the extra steps we can to
Would you like me to issue what I read to Council so you can have it to read at your leisure? Will that help?
You could pass it along to our,
Okay. You can take
our staff, and they can pass that along to us. Thank you. And for those, for yourself and your neighbors, Ms. Black, if you haven't already done so, I would encourage you to sign up for ListServe, one of the services that the city provides to help get information out and disseminate information. It's an email list, so if you're already on it, great. I'd encourage you to share the information with your neighbors and get them informed as well if you have the opportunity. Thank you very much for coming out today. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 5 is the School and Community Walking and Cycling Improvements 2016 status updates. We have introductory comments by the Manager of Transportation, and the report is before you for information.
Excellent. Mr. Mooney, how are you, sir? Welcome.
Good, thank you. Through the chair, before you is a report, an annual report that we brought forward for Council's consideration. In our opinion, it's a good news report. It talks about some of the efforts and accomplishments we've been able to achieve, both in our annual sidewalk and bicycle construction program at about a $600,000 investment that Council makes in cycling and pedestrians. We constructed about 1.8 kilometers of sidewalk in the last year and an additional 1.8 kilometers of bicycle facilities, specifically the multi-use paths along Johnson and Pine Tree Way. These are all in support of our strategic transportation goal of achieving a 30% mode share of active transportation by 2031. This annual program also complements our walkability program, which is now in the middle schools, 8 middle schools in the city of Coquitlam, where we invested over the past 2 years a significant amount of staff and monetary resources to go meet with all of these schools, dialogue with them, talk to them about the challenges, obstacles, and so on to active transportation into the middle schools, trying to reduce the amount of traffic congestion around middle schools. And in the middle school program, we included a significant component where we engaged HUB, which is our cycling advocacy group, to go out, and they actually instructed a total of 1,800 grade 5 and 6 students on engaged them and taught them how to ride safely. 1,000 students in 2015 and another 800 in 2016, so that they could utilize some of these assets that we're building out in our community and promote sustainable modes of transportation. So it's before you for information, and we would welcome any feedback or comments.
Excellent. Thank you very much. If I might, right off the top, I'll just say that I know you and your team have been very busy with this, as well as a number of other traffic safety initiatives and pedestrian safety initiatives. And I was noting with pleasure over the last couple of days, there's some work being done on the entrance points to Como Lake Village Shopping Center. And while that's not a city project, I know your department and you specifically have been quite involved in that. I think that's going to significantly improve the safety of the pedestrians and access in and out of that mall, and to enable people to not come to a dead stop on Como Lake in order to make the entrance. So I just take a moment to thank you for your work and the work of your team to help bring some of those initiatives forward. Councillor Towner is first on the list.
Thank you. I want to start off. I have a question and a few comments to make, but I want to just thank the Engineering and Public Works team for taking on this initiative. I've heard a ton of anecdotal evidence that it's really helped, and I want to say this wasn't specifically part of this project, but installing the sidewalk on Montgomery Street has made a huge difference in parents allowing their kids to walk down from Austin to school. And I think having more active kids out and about, getting to and from school, we all benefit. So I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I want to thank your team for your work with this. I have a question. I've recently been asked on more than one occasion does Coquitlam have, okay, about the installation of mid-block crosswalks? So some say they increase safety, because it's another option for kids to cross the street. And other people think that they increase the perception of safety and therefore actually decrease safety. And I'm just wondering, do we have a policy about mid-block crosswalks or best practices, or does it depend? I just didn't know how to answer this.
Mr. Mooney.
Through the chair, crosswalks exist whether they're marked or unmarked at intersections. And intersections really is where we want pedestrians to take advantage of those crossing opportunities. Where we have a distinct desire line for a school on one side of the street and a McDonald's or a 7-Eleven on the other side of the street in the middle of the block, and we have tried all other things to try and get them to go to the corners, we would and could and should entertain a mid-block crossing, but we would do it reluctantly, and we would do it in a means that really errs on the side of caution. The example I'll use is the 1000 block Austin Avenue, where Safeway is. We've got a mid-block crosswalk between Marmont Street and Nelson. Normally, we wouldn't want to have a crossing in the middle of that block, but there is a very strong desire line from the storefront businesses on the south side to the Safeway on the north side, and so we've put in a pedestrian-activated signal, the highest level device we would have there. Even with that device, we find that motorists, once they've left the intersection either at Marmont heading west or at Nelson heading east, they don't really anticipate having to stop in the middle of the block for that crossing. And we do see drivers drive right through that. We've added additional traffic signal heads to try and highlight that. So mid-block crossings should be avoided where possible. Land use, we can get them at a corner and get them to cross there where motorists are expecting them to cross is really the preferred route. We've had other ones in the middle of the block on Guilford Way, just east of Lansdowne, where we had the children crossing to the school, to the path, where we've put up signs. We looked at fences, but they're very, very expensive and physical in nature, and so we've installed some signs asking guiding the pedestrians just to walk a short distance, 100 meters down to the corner and cross at the intersection. So mid-block crossings should be avoided. Where they are absolutely necessary, we have to just make sure we use every trick in the bag to try and make it safe for the pedestrians. That's helpful.
Thank you for that. And as you were talking, I remember now that there's one that you put in, or our team put in, at Mundy Road Elementary when you were doing the elementary school. It's down because everybody was cutting through that trail by the bus stop and jaywalking. I was one of those parents, and so there's the curb bulges there and a mid-block crosswalk. So as I was listening to you, I remembered that one too, and that did a huge improvement for pedestrian safety. Thank you. I have a couple other things I just want to say. I want to publicly congratulate Maple Creek Middle School as coming out as the top school in all of Metro Vancouver in terms of their participation rate during Bike to School Week. So congratulations to Maple School Middle. And I've already told you about the anecdotal feedback I've heard from many parents and kids about the educational bike training that they got from Hub. It's really, or Haste, is it Hub or Haste? Was outstanding. And a lot of parents now allow their kids to ride their bikes, not just to and from school, but in our city because of that. So that was extremely beneficial. And I also want to say that because of this initiative, Montgomery Middle has decided to be a pilot in the Tri-Cities with the crosswalk flags. So I don't know, we've talked about that, but they've gone ahead, purchased the flags, and they're going to be on Mundy Road because a lot of kids come and cross Mundy. So I'll let you know how that goes through my work on the pack there. And I just wanted to show everybody that this is what the final product looks like. The map that was produced about the best routes coming to school. This is the one for Monty Middle. So it's quite detailed. It shows the safest routes and quickest way to get to school and whatnot. So it's good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Towner. Anybody else?
Second. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I was also going to talk about the cycling program. I heard great comments on it as well, and I had a conversation with some of the people at Hub, and they talked about how they thought it was very effective. And so because the program is finished, we've done the improvements and all that, then the cycling training portion of it will be finished now as well. That's what I understand.
Mr. Mooney.
Through the chair, we still have a fair amount of work to do in terms of the improvements. We hope to be finished by the end of next year, the physical improvements that come from this program. The education component is a real challenging one. We believe that there is a need for ongoing education and awareness as these children that they taught the 1800 in grades 5 and 6 move on. There's going to be other children coming into the system. The challenge really is to how to make that happen. Whose role and responsibility is it, and who is best positioned to provide that education? There are a number of cycling advocates, including Hub, that are out doing instructional programming. Pedalheads is one that Hub supports through summer school type programs. When I went through the school program, it was the Vancouver Police Department that came out to the elementary schools and did our cycling education. My understanding is that that's not part of the curriculum currently within the school district. It's unfortunate because we were able to deliver it for that 2-year window through Hub, and we believe there is a void there that needs to be filled by somebody. We don't believe it's an engineering and public works role to deliver it, but we would certainly benefit from it. And we, I guess, in this program, we selfishly used it as a way to identify needs and gaps and what the potential is for people riding to school and to other trips, and to try and promote it. And we believe it's, like I say, a void that would be nice to see somebody step up and deliver, whether it be through the school district, through our recreation facilities, or other community service groups that could promote safe cycling education.
So it definitely could be the partnership between our Parks and Rec and the school district and the parent advisory committees and perhaps RCMP and fire in the Coquitlam district.
Yeah, I think service clubs. There are others as well that I think could step up and fill that void. I was asked, and I don't mind saying, from our perspective, I don't see the engineering and public works role being an ongoing funding supply supporter to that program or even delivering it. But definitely there is a community need and a gap that we would love to work with Hub and others to see if we can fill that void in the community through, like I say, either the school district, perhaps Parks, Recreation, a service club, or the RCMP.
Well, I think it's great that you did it for the 2 years, and you've shown how successful it can be, and also shown that there will be a big void now that it's done. So I really hope that we can work with our Parks and Rec and the school district to try to figure out some way, because it's a huge deal, right? We want kids to be more active. We don't want their parents dropping them off at school, and this combines both, right? The parents aren't dropping them off at school, and they're actually getting more activity. And I think once they get used to riding to school, they'll ride elsewhere as well. So we want to create sort of lifelong habits if we're going to, accomplish the goals that we have. So thanks for doing that. I really hope that we can work to keep it going. The only question was about the maps. So the maps have been produced. Are they distributed to the schools annually? Do the schools take over the reproduction of the maps? How does that work so that this information continues to be put out there?
Through the chair, the maps for the first 4 middle schools have been distributed. For the second 4 middle schools, they'll be distributed in the spring of this coming year. Once they're distributed, it's then the school districts and schools' responsibility to reproduce those. If they think that there's been a major change, a new road link or a new opportunity, we would certainly welcome the opportunity to engage with them to update it, to make any minor adjustments. But once it's produced, it resides with the school, and they would reproduce it and distribute it annually if needed.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Zarrillo.
Just to follow up on that about the Ride the Road, what was the city's financial investment just for the educational component? Sorry.
I would have to get back to you. It was a partnership shared equally between us and Haste BC, Travel Smart through TransLink. We shared it 50%, 50%, and I'd have to get back to you on the exact figure that we used for Hub over the 2 years.
So is it in our budget again for this year to carry on? If TransLink comes again with 50-50, like, do we have budget money for it for this year?
It's not currently allocated. We, both in terms of the monetary as well as our staff resource work plan, the middle school walkability program has been completed as it currently sits.
Okay. So this is maybe not the time to ask for funding for it, but I'm wondering if it's possible to at least send a letter to the school district and perhaps the school board to share with them the data that you've shared with us today and perhaps this report, and just the desire on behalf of the city of Coquitlam to have some sort of education component administered some way through the school district, and perhaps we were willing to be a partner or a willing partner, because there is a lot of data in this report that says it's very beneficial to their sense of independence and security for that. Is it possible through the chair for us to be able to send a letter to school district and school board?
Perhaps Mr. Mooney can speak to prior to that, the final report. Was there a copy of it and a cover letter forwarded to the school district summarizing everything?
Through the chair, the final report of Hub is attached as attachment 4. That was also shared with representatives from the school district that sat on our steering group. We could forward on, attach a copy of this current report to the school district and allow them the opportunity to have a look at the full report, and to, I guess, to again extend an invitation to them to consider continuing on with some form of public education on cycling initiatives through the school system. As I say, I think the school is one option. The recreation facilities, there are private sector programs that are out there for cycling awareness as well.
Okay. So it is clear to the school district that the onus is on them. The ball is back in their court with regards to the reproduction of these maps and the ongoing work. That's correct?
Through the chair, yes. In terms of the walking plans, in terms of the cycling, we've made it clear that we don't have it in our purview or in our work program from the Engineering Public Works perspective to see that going on, and we all agreed unanimously, whether it was the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education representatives, the Hub people, the TransLink people, that there is a need for ongoing cycling. We're looking at going also into our high schools in the next couple of years and doing a similar program there, and we're going to be talking about driving education. Now, we're not going to be providing driving education. There's private sector people that do that. But we think adults, young adults in high school need to know what the responsibilities are for drivers, even if they don't drive. And they should know what good riding habits are, even if they don't ride a bicycle, know what the legislation is. I think regardless of what mode of travel you're in at any one time, being aware of what the other modes, responsibilities, obligations, shortcomings, and faults are, make for a safer environment for everybody. So like cycling, we believe we need to raise the awareness about driving, but we're not responsible for delivering driving education. And so we'll be taking a similar type approach in that program in coming years. Certainly for this year, I think a good closure, and hearing the discussion here today reminds us and challenges us to go back to those other stakeholders and ask and remind again everybody to consider what their opportunities and obligations are and what they might be able to do either individually or collectively to try and deliver on that identified gap.
Okay. So I believe the takeaways on this, where you're going to get back to us with regards to the costs, as per Councillor Zerillo's question, and thus any feedback to the other stakeholders and partners to encourage them. We certainly see the value here.
Certainly do that.
There. That appeared to be a general consensus here in terms of the speakers that have gone already, that there's support to see some work for ongoing, or at least our support for the ongoing, without owning it and leading it ourselves.
So is that a letter to the school district and the school board and chair?
Through the chair, I would suggest a letter to all of the participants that we had in our stakeholders. So that would include the school district, but also the Ministry of Health, and the TransLink hub themselves, the Travel Smart people at TransLink, and all partners.
That would be incredible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. I think back to about 9 years ago when the then DPAC president appeared before the school board. It was a different school board, different staff, but the response on these issues wasn't as immediate. And I want to express my appreciation for the city having stepped up and done this. And it was successive councils that have decided that, yes, we can actually invest here. And the current school board, I've heard from, in fact, I just was traveling, I had the opportunity to hear from a representative of the school board repeatedly that, yes, these are great improvements at the elementary school, certainly, and now at the middle school level, that they really go a long way. Now, we recognize that the school board has different financial challenges, and that expending capital dollars outside of the classroom is still not in the cards. They're not there yet. But to the extent that we're able to, on public property, on city property, not on school property, but on city property, effect some remediation of the risks that kids were under is absolutely appreciated. But to Councillor Zerillo's point and to the chair's point, I think a letter would certainly continue. We ought to continue to put that forward and say that, yeah, we're making these investments, and remind everybody that there's a lot of work to be done by all parties on the operational side and on the capital side. We're going to put the capital in. We're going to put a bit of operational, and Travel Smart will do some operational. We'll do some work in that regard. But it's going to be a team effort that results in increased safety for our students. And in the end, we will never hear about the results. The results will be that some child doesn't get hurt, and we won't hear about that one. Thank goodness. Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I heard earlier a motion from Councillor O'Neill to receive. Second by Councillor Asmundson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Madam Clerk, next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to other business. The first other business item concerns pre-apps and community consult and was raised by Councillor Zerillo.
Councillor Zerillo. Your microphone. You got it.
This is in regards to some communications that I received a few weeks ago from members in the community that had been at a community consultation about a development potentially coming to Coquitlam, and they were wondering why there weren't councillors there, and I wasn't aware of the development, and it made me wonder about the process for pre-applications as developers go out to community consultation. I was wondering if perhaps through the chair, someone from planning maybe can just let this council know what that process is for developers in regards to their duty or requirement to consult the community at the pre-app stage, and then also to understand how council could or could not be in the loop on that, just understanding that there is community consultation going out in the community. So if we hear about it, we at least are prepared. So those are the two things I'm wondering about.
Excellent. So the pre-app, of course, is done, comes into your office. It does go onto the city website long before perhaps council sees it. But Mr. McIntyre, can you speak to the process?
Gladly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The city introduced formally a pre-application process a number of years ago. The intention there was to allow for preliminary proposals, ideas to come forward without getting into a full-blown OCP amendment or rezoning process where the applicant can come forward with some ideas. It gives them the opportunity to submit that pre-application to staff in Georgia's section in development planning. There's a referral out to the various departments, engineering, parks, and so on. So we are able to give the applicant a coordinated response at a preliminary level from a staff's perspective. With the pre-app, there's a couple of options for the applicant. One is if they choose, they can come forward to council, and on rare occasion, you'll see a party come in to council chambers and present their idea and just get an initial sounding from council. As well, at their choosing, they can consult with the residents around in the neighborhood, and that's what I understand has happened in this case here. Through that, there has been some questions raised and some concerns that we've come to our attention. How council's informed? Yes, I think it's noted, Mr. Chair, it goes on the city's website. I think also it goes into the monthly reports we provide to council. We try to flag applications coming in, including pre-apps, so it would be there. In this case, and I'll hand it off to George here in a moment because the staff is more directly involved, I think the applicant decided to initiate dialogue with the neighborhood, and I think there was an open house they had for part of a day, and that's where things are at right now. But maybe, George, you want to fill in the blanks on this one?
Mr. Fuji.
Thank you. So to the chair of the council, this pre-application goes back to earlier this summer. So it's been kicking around for a while, and the applicant has had some contact with the neighbors of the site. There was some issues identified by the members of the public, and in fact, am I on? And in fact, in our first requirements letter we sent back to the applicant back in August, we had identified that not only staff but the public had a number of concerns.
Yes, Councillor O'Neill.
My colleague asked a general question, and which led to perhaps a suggestion of a specific issue. I don't know what specific issue we're talking about. Mr. Fuji is talking about a specific issue. I don't know, and I don't know if we should be talking. We can if we want to, but I don't think any member of the public could possibly know right now what we're talking about. So I'd like to know if we're going to talk about a specific issue, which issue it is.
I'm asking a generic question.
It was a general question. It might have been prompted by a specific interaction, but it was more general in nature in terms of process. So. To Councillor Zerillo, has your initial inquiry been addressed? Or is there outstanding items as opposed to going into the detail of a specific request?
I don't want to focus on a specific
Absolutely.
application. My question was, so it's a formal process. There's a formal pre-application process. So my follow-ups would be, because there was a suggestion that they can come directly to council and that's their choosing. But I'm wondering, because what I've heard on more than one occasion is that these developers are encouraged, we've done it here even at this council table, encourage developers to go out and seek the community input beforehand to get a better handle on how even a public hearing might happen. So I guess I want to understand where does this formal pre-app process truly begin visibility? Does it begin visibility when it comes to the website? And if it does, where is it and why? Where is it on the website and why does it go there? And second of all, when there is the next stage, which is some sort of open house or community consultation, is there any way for council to be made aware, or is there any way for council to be involved in this formal pre-app process without actually having input, but just being aware that it's happening in the community?
Mr. McIntyre.
Yeah, thank you. Point taken. When a neighborhood event is scheduled and we're aware of it, we will make a better point of informing council. Again, and I'll go back and I'll check to make sure our processes are in place. But my understanding is when the pre-application comes in, it goes on to that monthly report the council receives to give you a heads up of what's being presented and discussed. And we'll want to make sure that information's in there. As they progress through, if there is any sort of public meeting or consultation, we will do a better job of just informing council so you're aware.
So sorry, through the chair, if I could. So the thing is, we don't want councillors going out to these pre-application community, but how can we stop councillors? I guess I'm really trying to understand, if we're going to have a formal process, then let's share it with council so we know what the process is too, because you don't want 9 of us running out to all of these community consults either. So how do we? Councillor O'Neill wants to know where it is on the website still too.
I can send you a link later, Councillor O'Neill.
So is as part of the formal pre-app process, is there any mention there of how this gets to council and what council should do, and if there's a petition involved, does it go to council? Like, I guess I'd like to know what's the formal process and how is council involved in that formal process, or not at all?
So to clarify, Mr. McIntyre, these could very well be a developer spitballing ideas through the pre-app process, and it may never see the light of the council floor because either A, staff have discouraged it in terms of fit, or B, council or staff has encouraged them to reach out to the community, and the response they got back was not positive, so they chose not to bring forward. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think that hits on two of the points. Again, the whole intention of the pre-app process was to provide for a fairly focused, expedited, front-end, very preliminary conceptual phase, if you will, where there could be a discussion, some consultation in the neighborhood, just to see, as you say, spitballing an idea, to see if there's any traction with that. It's also, we find it useful, so it gives the applicant, a prospective applicant, some idea as to what the various city departments would be looking for, like technically. Is there a transportation issue? Is there a deal breaker in terms of the services that are available at that site? So it's designed to provide in a fairly straightforward manner sort of what the challenges might be with an application.
Okay, so I've just got two things. So three, actually. One, I'm going to say thank you. I think that would be great to have council aware if there's community consultation happening, and for sure I'll watch those reports. Appreciate it. My two questions are, is there a fee for pre-app?
I see nods. Could I get a verbal affirmation?
It's a $500 application fee for the staff time involved in reviewing pre-apps.
Great. And then my second question is, does it need to be published on the city website? Is that the best practice to have these pre-apps published? That's my question. Like, what would be the downside of not publishing it?
Mr. McIntyre.
Yeah. Interesting question. We have legislative responsibilities for applications that come into planning and development. We need to keep a record of that. It's supposed to be there available for public information if someone comes to our counter. In this day and age, what's at the front counter is also on the website. That makes that much more accessible. So just the same way that the various rezoning applications and subdivision and development permit applications, we keep a running record of that. It's part of the public record. And so the pre-apps are treated in the same way. And again, that's why we try to capture them in those monthly reports, so it shows these applications and just the properties that are involved and it's for information.
Okay, so I guess my biggest piece is just if council could just have a heads up, and if it's in the report, that's great. I'll keep my eye open for them, and I'm glad to hear that it's a formal pre-app process, and thank you for that.
Great.
Councillor Hodge.
Well, thank you for raising this. About getting into specific applications, that there have been a couple over the years that have become rather involved before they get to the council chamber. And we've had emails recently about a petition with 300 names on it. And certainly I think it went to all of council, but I heard about it and sort of thought, well, we haven't received it. And so there is part of this process, quite a bit of back and forth between staff, and I get that there's a lot of work takes place at the counter on any application. But what we're hearing about quite often is, well, this has been revised, or this is going back and forth, or the community has until such and such a date to comment. Is that normal in a pre-application that staff will also accept community comment? Is that part of the pre-application?
Mr. McIntyre.
If we receive input, we will note that. We're not out there actively seeking it. Like, there's not notices going out. There's not a hearing or anything like that. Again, it's more focused around working with the applicant with their initial concept.
So I guess my challenge is what is really a front counter staff function sometimes spills out into the public. And when it spills out into the public, there's an expectation that council's involved, that we know what was going on. And at a recent one that came up last summer, I believe a developer put his application through. It got onto the website. A resident or somebody spotted it, started a discussion. The applicant felt that they then had to respond. Then there was comment that I received, and the email I got, or actually a phone call while I was on vacation in August, was, I've been told I have until this such a date to respond. Can you give me information? I said, this is the first I'm hearing of this. So this is where it becomes a challenge, is, or we get a letter that says, you know, I'm one of the 300 people that signed a petition. So this is all sort of going on in a very public forum that the public expects that we're engaged in, and yet we probably really shouldn't be engaged at that point. And so I think our challenge is what becomes a pre-application or a discussion with staff, in some case blows up into a full community consultation with public meetings and petitions, and everybody's going, where's council? And so I think to Councillor Zarilla's comment, that's when it becomes sort of problematic. And I'm glad you sort of covered off what's the statutory requirements, because some of it we have to do, but I'd sort of like to get an idea of how much is this just sort of evolved into, this is the way we do things, and maybe it works 95% of the time, but those 5%, it sort of makes it look like that council's oblivious or doesn't care.
Mr. McIntyre.
Mr. Chair, I'm very sorry to hear that, because obviously we don't want to put any process in place that's going to cast council in a negative way. And I get it. You know, there's the potential of things going on, and sometimes it will bubble up. There'll be discussion out in the neighborhood. Where a deadline set, again, that would not be through staff, because we're not out there actively seeking the input of the neighborhood. You know, that may be the applicant, their consultant. But we will do a better job. I'll go back with George. We'll just recheck our processes around the pre-apps. We'll make sure they're being flagged in the monthly reports. If we're aware that there's a consultation event being held, we'll certainly bring that to council's attention. And again, I would just urge council that you can say that we're generally aware the pre-apps are underway. It's at a preliminary stage. It's a technical thing between our staff and the applicant. If the application is formalized as a rezoning or official community plan amendment, it would come forward ultimately through a formal process to council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Well, that was my earlier interjection.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson.
I actually went to the community consultation recently for the project that some people are sort of referring to, because I wanted to find out more about it. I'd heard that there was a lot of community opposition to it. I wore a baseball hat, tried to stay anonymous, and was successful at doing that for about an hour, and then got noticed. But in talking to some of the consultants there, they'd mentioned that it's not in their experience, not all municipalities post pre-application information on websites. And an example was given to me about, you know, a project that ended up going through the process being much different, and had it been made public, it might not have actually worked out as well as it did in the end to satisfy everybody's needs. So to hear that that's a requirement was a little bit surprising to me based on what I'd heard from one of the consultants. So is there a chance that he's wrong and it is a requirement this particular municipality was talking about was in error, or is that definitely the case?
Mr. McIntyre.
I appreciate the discussion here this afternoon. We can check around and see what other municipalities do around the pre-apps. It's not 100% coverage. Other municipalities that do that. And perhaps again, George may comment, having recently come from Vancouver and prior to that Surrey. And again, different planning departments may take a different interpretation of what the legislative responsibilities are around applications. Our view has been that a pre-app is a form of application. It's a more focused, less expensive, expedited process, but it is an application. And we're a public agency, and I'm not sure that by keeping it quiet it has ultimately benefit to the neighborhood. You know, it may shield the applicant, but it just strikes me intuitively that if we're processing things through our system, it's part of the public record. But we'll check. We'll find. George, any?
Yeah, and if I can add to that, yeah, Jim is correct. Not all cities have a formal pre-application application, so to speak. We offer that as a service to sort of potential applicants, so that they can go into a project with, shall we say, eyes wide open, so we can identify for them early on in the process, prior to spending the big dollars for consultants and other things, some of the shall we call them big ticket items that they should be aware of should they choose to make an application. So it is a service that we try to provide, so that people go in with being aware of some of the various issues, because we as a staff, through previous applications, just through our knowledge of council, can provide some early warning signals to a potential applicant.
Thank you. Councilor Reid.
Well, I think this was all my fault, wasn't it, Mr. McIntyre? Back when we had the Land Use Committee, and Councillor Asmussen was there for that, we used to get some pretty complicated, big, long applications to do things, and for various reasons. Some of them because we had neighborhood plans in the works or other things that weren't in the public realm yet, would come in, and they just were going to be kind of inappropriate to where the city direction was headed. And at that time, people, the developers or proponents, were coming in and having to pay huge fees, and then finally get to where they came before us, and then to first reading, and then down the road. So I used to call it float your boat, which is probably the wrong thing. But in a way, we needed to really watch our staff time. And if something probably wouldn't get legs and go anywhere, then it was made much more sense not to waste all our staff time, but to allow people to come in with a sort of an overview of what they wanted to do and come forward, and that was a pre-app. So council could look at it and say, oh, well, that interests me. And if the proponent felt that he had a good chance of moving his project through, then it would go to staff and go through the normal process. The whole reason being to do this is because we can't bog staff down on a whole bunch of stuff that just won't work in the grand scheme of things. It's not that picture, but it's the big picture. And so this has seemed to work for us quite well for the last 5 or 8 years or so. And I commend staff on it. All the stuff on the website and that, I'll leave it to you to decipher, but I think this is really beneficial for us. It's really beneficial, because then someone isn't coming in here wasting tons and tons of time trying to put Disneyland next door to City Hall. Done.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a good process. I think they've changed the classification. It used to be 879. I think they've changed it for something now in the Local Government Act as prior consultation. That's up to the developer proponent to do that prior consultation if they wish. And May is right. We had issues before where an application would come in and it would pretty much find a lot of opposition, a lot of problems, would bog down council and staff. And we recommended a number of years ago that staff inform the developers to go out and do prior consultation as to smooth off the application to make it more, if it is presentable to what the public would, and make their process for getting acceptance better. The other part of that was that all that consultation or written comments from that consultation meeting would also be further attached to the future reports going to council as their consultation from that report, that council would then see some of that information and the concerns raised then as part of the information moving to council when the report does come to council. So at that point, council sees the written information that was handed in and some of the verbal impressions by staff moving forward on that report. And I think that's a good way of doing it. I agree with Councillor Zeros that, you know, we don't need to know at this point. They're still being worked out a lot of issues. And I also agree with Councillor Zeros' position that really these type of things, I don't think it benefits council to be there. And I think at times council, if they do show up there, can create a different expectations either for or against the project by being there. So I think it's better to let the public give their input clean and see what the developer gets, and then the developer can make his decision at that point. Does he want to ignore that and move forward, or does he want to modify his plan and come back with something that he thinks will be more acceptable to the public in that area? So I think this is a good process, and I think we should continue with it moving forward. From time to time, we will have a hiccup where there's one that draws a lot of attention, but over the years, I think, May, as you said, there has not been many that have peaked like this before. So that's a good process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zerillo, second time.
Yeah, I just wanted to have an opportunity to say I don't think anybody was saying that it's a bad process, and just to go back where we were at the start, I was just asking about what our duty was, and Mr. McIntyre laid it out clearly that it's public record, whether it goes on the website or not, it will still be public record. And you've addressed my concern about how to get council in the loop going forward. So just wanted to put it out there that I had no intentions of saying it wasn't a good process, and you've satisfied my questions, so thank you.
Great. So thank you, Mr. McIntyre. I know you've spent some time with me previously explaining the pre-app process and the thought behind it. And I think what you've heard from the group, there is definitely support for that. Councillors Reid and Asmundson, I think, very well articulated the reasons behind it and the benefits from a staff utilization of time. I did express to you previously my concern with regards to having it on the website. And first off, legislatively, if it's not required, we want the transparency. What I prefer to avoid by having things on the website, again, if they're just floating a trial balloon, that could create unrest in a community and in a neighborhood that we don't need to have, which creates additional work on staff desks. And then it brings council into the loop on issues that may never come to our floor. So if there's an ability to not have it out there, I mean, if there's developer needs to go out and do that, that's great. But let's not have a bunch of trial balloons on there that could cause concern. Absolutely. It could be something they put in the application, it goes on the website, and staff look and say, this is a non-starter. In the meantime, we've got neighbors knocking on doors, drumming up support against something that you're never going to let see the light of day, just because it doesn't fit to the fabric of the community. So I'd really encourage you, and I think you've heard it today, to take a hard look at the web piece. Make sure we've got our public records all maintained, of course, but let's not create unrest where it doesn't need to be. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's an excellent summary. Like in any process, there's times you check in and make sure it might need a little tweaking here and there. We heard some questions today. We will go back and look at that website obligation or not. And again, we'll do a better job of informing council if these things if some sort of public event is being scheduled around a pre-app, so you have a heads up from us as opposed to hearing it out in the street. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And that, I believe, is our last item. Moved adjournment by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. Favor, opposed, carried. Turn over to the next room. We'll head back.